Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good afternoon. Well, my name is Fikriansyah and my official number is A1M223050. Okay, on this video I'm going to explain my research, namely exploring student difficulties in understanding grammatical function of uh, subject-verb agreement, auxiliary verb, modal verb in EFL learning. Well, without further ado, let's just start the presentation. Okay. On my research, we're going to talk about the background. Well, in my background of the study, the core discussion is that grammar is a crucial element in English learning, especially in EFL context, as it helps students construct sentences accurately and meaningful. From this study highlights that many students still experience difficulties with subject-verb agreement, auxiliary verbs, and modals because grammar learning often emphasizes memorizing rules rather than understanding their function in context. Therefore, this study is important to determine whether the student difficulties arise more in form, function, or both. This is in line with Halliday's theory, 1978 to 1985, uh, suggests that throughout systematic functional grammar, or SVG, which explain that grammar is not just a collection of rules but a system that function as meaning making resource or tool for constructing meaning in communication. Thus, when the students experience grammatical difficulties, the problem is not only errors in form but also a failure to understand the function of language in the context. Okay, next slide, we are going to talk about research question. Well, in the research question section, the focus is on two questions. One, what are the specific difficulties experienced by students in understanding and applying the grammatical function of subject-verb agreement, uh, auxiliary verb, auxiliary verb, and modals verb in test-based context in EFL learning. And the second research question is, what are the internal and external factors that contribute to students' difficulties in understanding and applying this grammatical function? So, in other words, this section indicates that main direction of the research is in examining not only student error but also their causes. Okay, on the next slide, we are going to talk about research objective. In the research objective section, the purpose of the study is to identify and describe the specific difficulties experienced by students in understanding and applying the grammatical function of subject-verb agreement, auxiliary verb, and modal verb in test-based context in EFL learning. Then the second research objective is to explore and analyze the internal and external factors that contribute to student difficulties in understanding and applying this grammatical function. Therefore, the purpose of this study is to describe and exploratory, not to test treatment or comparing results. Okay, on the next slide, I'm going to explain the significance of the study. Well, in the significance section of the study, I will only explain two aspects. This is theoretical significance and pragmatical significance. So, the core benefits are divided into two. Well, theoretical, this research is in search to In research, the study of the grammar in EFL form, the perspective of systematic functional grammar by Halliday, and practically uh, the results of the study are useful for determine for learning evaluation, for lecturer to improve grammar teaching method, and for students to understand their weakness and gain confidence in using English. So we move to the next slide. Well, on the next slide, I'm going to explain the scope of the study. Well, because the scope of the study is classified to 4 points, so I'm going to explain all of them at once. Well, in the term of scope of the study, this research is limited to EFL students at Haluoleo University, especially sixth semester students from the class of 2023. And the study focused on only three aspects of grammar. One is subject-verb agreement, two, auxiliary verbs, and three, modals verb. And this research is using a qualitative approach that emphasizes describing difficulties and their contributing factors. This limit is important to ensure the research remain focused on and on not overly overboard. Okay, we are going to move to the next chapter. Okay, on the next chapter, chapter 2, discussing about theoretical framework. Okay, on theoretical framework that serve as a basic for analyzing student difficulties in understanding the grammatical function of tense structure. This framework is built to around several key concepts: grammar in EFL context, the concept of tenses, and three important aspects of English sentence formation. There are subject-verb agreement, auxiliary verbs, and modals verb. In this study, grammar is not simply viewed as rule to be memorized, but rather as a system that plays a role in constructing meaning and conveying message appropriately according to concept. Therefore, Halliday system function grammar or SVG theory is used as the primary foundations because it emphasizes that grammar is meaning-making research, and therefore grammar must be viewed based on this function and role in communication. And therefore, this study explained that EFL students' difficulties in understanding tenses often occur because tenses is not only related to change in verb forms but also involved in relationship between subject and verb, the use of auxiliaries to form sub-aspect, negativations, and interrogative sentence, and the use of modals to convey meaning such as ability, possibility, obligation, and permission. And also errors such as agreement consistencies, omission of auxiliary verbs, and misuse of modals indicate that students often understand grammatical form superficially but do not yet understand their actual function in the sentence structure. So to clarify this phenomenon, this study is also supported by Slinker in interlanguage theory, which explained that students' errors are part of the second language development process. In addition, these difficulties are influenced by internal factors such as motivation, interest, and priority knowledge, as well as external factors as teaching methods, learning environments, and learning materials as explained by ELs. Thus, this overall theory forms a conceptual framework that helps research explain student difficulties in more depth, both in terms of grammatical function and their causal factors. Okay, next we are going to explain previous studies. Well, previous studies have generally focused on the grammar errors in terms of form and frequency, but some or few have addressed student difficulties in understanding grammatical function in more integrated manner. Therefore, this study is relevant in expanding previous study by positioning grammar not merely as rules, but as a system that shapes meaning in communication. First, this allied with Halliday's theory, namely systematic functional grammar, which emphasized that language must not must be understood throughout its intentional interpersonal, and textual function. Therefore, this study examines not only whether students make error, but also how they understand the function of the grammar in construction meaning. The next study then is by Comrie theory, which explained that tenses is a grammaticalization of time. Therefore, students' error often occur because they perceive tenses solely as a change in verb form, even though tenses also depend on other elements such as auxiliary verb and agreement. Next, therefore, previous study discussing subject-verb agreement, auxiliary verb, and modal verb can also be understood through the theory of Biber at Biber 1999, which examines that agreement and auxiliary verb are core elements in English clause structure. Biber explains that auxiliary verbs have important function in form tenses, negativation, question, and aspects. So errors in this section indicates that students do not fully understand the foundation of sentence structure. And next is Palmer theory, discussion of modals verb. And he emphasized that modality is related to the meaning such as possibility, certainty, obligation, and permission, not just grammatical form alone. And and thus this study is important because the combination this previous theory to analyze student difficulties more comprehensively, both in terms of grammatical function and causal factors. Okay, now we are going to move to the next slide. On this slide, I'm going to explain Chapter 3, Research Method. Okay, the first on the research methods, they are research design. Well, research design is a descriptive in my research design, I use a descriptive qualitative design in the case study approach. This choice is appropriate because the research objective is not to test a hypothesis, but rather to provide an in-depth description of students' difficulties in understanding grammatical function of tenses. This approach also allows the research to examine the problem in the real-life learning context. Next is data research. In my research, uh, in my data research, I used a student 6th semester English language education student at Haluoleo University, class of 2023. And also, I use uh, two different data resources. There are primary data were obtained from test result and student response, while my secondary data came from grammar textbooks, course materials, syllabus, and previous research. Therefore, the data used not only comes from student response but also support research to strengthen the analysis. The next is research instrument. Well, in my research method, I use three instruments. There are a written test, an interview guide, and documentation. Well, the test is used to descriptively identify grammatical error, and interview are used to explore the reason behind student difficulties, and documentation is used to supply the supporting data. Thus, these instruments complete each others. Next is data collection. The next is technique of data collection. Well, the the data collection begins with obtaining research information. Next is selecting participation, administering a grammar test, interview selection student, and finally collecting supporting documents. This flow documentates that data collection was conducted in state to ensure comprehensive result and relate to research objective. And the last is trustworthiness of data. Where my research method I use where my trustworthiness of data was maintained throughout triangulation and member checking, where triangulation was achieved by comparing test results, interview, and documentation, while member checking was conducted by confirming the transcript with participants. This approach increased the credibility and truthworthiness of the data. Okay, on the last of this discussion, I will explain the expectation of the findings of my research. Okay, this study is expected to find that 16 semester EFL students at Haluoleo University experience specific difficulties in understanding and applying the grammatical function of subject-verb agreement, auxiliary verbs, and modal verbs in tenses-based context. The findings may show that students frequently make errors in matching subject with correct verb forms, misuse or omit auxiliary verbs in question and negative sentence, and confuse the meaning on and function of modal verb when expressing obligation, possibility, or ability. These results are expected to answer the first question of the research question by identifying that students' problems are not only related to grammatical forms but also to the limited understanding of grammatical function in constructing meaningful sentences. And additionally, this study is expect to reveal that students' difficulties are influenced by both internal and external factors. The internal factors may include low motivation, limited learning interest, and weak prior grammar knowledge, while the external factors may involve teaching methods that focus on memorization, limit English exposure in the learning environment, and learning materials that lack contextual function practice. These findings are expected to answer the second research question by explaining that students' difficulties emerge from the interaction between learning conditions and constructional supports in EFL classroom context. Okay, I think that's just all of my presentation of my research of our study. Well, so I'm going to close this presentation by saying wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and I'm going to say I'm sorry if I have say a wrong word of misunderstood of my presentation. Thank you very much for watching and see you.